Let's go ahead and mute the studio mic.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good
battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. And we are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studio in Huntsville, Alabama. School privatization is still bad. The IBEW fights for good jobs in Birmingham, and there are good union jobs available in North Alabama. And just a reminder, the boss is responsible for inflation, not the workers. And you know what? We've got more on today's program. If you want to be a part of the program, you can give us a call. We've got a phone number. That is 844-899-TVLR. 844-899-8857. You can call or text during the program, and you can also leave us a voicemail throughout the week, and we might play it on the radio during the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us online. We are all over the place, wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, all at The Valley Labor Report. And just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of revenue comes directly from our listeners in the form of monthly donations. So if you want to help us stay on the air, then you can become a sustaining member of the program or make a one-time donation at unionly.io/o/TVLR. That is unionly.io/o/TVLR, or you can go to patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. But I will say that the Unionly processing fee is lower than the Patreon fee, and Unionly is a union business that supports unions, labor organization, union businesses, things like that. So that's a good way to make sure more of your money goes towards what you're wanting it to go towards, which is supporting the show, but also supporting a union business. And if you're a member of a union, then you should get your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to me for more details on that. So first up, we've got Brother Bill Blackman on the line. Bill is the business agent of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136, and they are putting in the work down in Birmingham. So Bill, thanks for speaking to us today. I appreciate it.
Hey, glad to be on. Thank you for having me, Jacob.
Absolutely, absolutely. I saw in Jonah Furman's newsletter, Who Gets the Bird, that the IBEW they are organizing some folks at an electrical co-op in Marshall County. It's local 443, so I don't know how, but were you aware of that?
Absolutely, I am. It is 443 handles the outside jurisdiction for this part of the state, and that's why they're the ones organizing this group.
Awesome.
They actually have filtered through me and Tony Quillen and all to get to the right people, but they're there now and ready to go.
That's fantastic. That is really great. I saw that in the newsletter this week, and I was like, oh, hey, I love to see Alabama in the newsletter. That's awesome. So, first, we're going to talk about your apprenticeship program and a responsible bidder ordinance that y'all are pushing through. And let's figure out what's going on with the responsible bidder ordinance first. I was trying to do some research, some prep yesterday for figuring out what's going on, what the state of it was. And basically the only thing that I could find, I couldn't find any local news articles about it. The only thing that I could find was your interview on America's Workforce radio podcast with Ed Flash Ferentz back in September. And that's a union talk radio program in Ohio. Has local media spoken to you about this at all, and it's just not showing up? Or do they not, is there nobody really covering this?
there's really nobody covering it. Welcome to the South.
Yeah.
It's a case of we're trying to push something positive here. The responsible bidder ordinance, basically what it would say is that any of the city of Birmingham's tax dollars that were spent on capital projects, construction projects, would have to, those contractors and subcontractors would have to participate in a Department of Labor accredited apprenticeship. For years, we've heard these commercials about losing the craftsmen. We've seen the dirty jobs programs and the Go Build Alabama commercials, all that, but nothing that funnels you into a Department of Labor accredited apprenticeship. You wind up learning tasks and not learning to be a craftsman when you're not in a full-fledged indentured apprenticeship. So the idea here is to create opportunities to learn a craft because it takes on the job training. It takes those things. When the city of Birmingham invests, they should be investing into their citizens as well to create these craftsmen.
Right.
And that's the premise that I'm selling it on to the city council. And I've gotten some great assistance from Mayor Woodfin. I've gotten some great assistance from Earl Hilliard, who is Mayor Woodfin's Chief of Governmental Affairs. And it's progressing.
That is one of the most common sense things to me is when we're talking about spending tax dollars on projects, there should be strings attached, and some of the most common sense strings should be good wages, good benefits, and proper training. And this goes to that latter part of it, the learning a trade through a Department of Labor accredited apprenticeship program. Talk to us about the difference between a DOL accredited apprenticeship and a non-DOL accredited apprenticeship.
Well, the DOL has been in place for a long time, and not to cut the state of Alabama short in any means here either. They have developed the Alabama Office of Apprenticeship, AOA, that is actually becoming our go-between between us and the Federal Department of Labor, and has been great to work with so far, and look forward to a long relationship with them as well. But it sets standards in place that gives you a well-balanced, well-rounded training in a particular craft and in industry that rather than some of these others that may just train you for a task. You spend your career and learn nothing but how to pull a wire.
Right.
And not what to do with that wire when you get it there, or how to hook it up, or the principle behind how to make this conveyor belt run, how to make it turn off at the right time, that sort of thing.
Why do you think that? Why do you think that this ordinance isn't in basically every municipality or even as a statewide thing already? Because this seems like a common sense kind of thing.
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe it's because it is a common sense kind of thing. In all honesty, I mean, the state of Alabama is, well, we're such a red state, we call our team the Crimson Tide. We are business friendly. We are right to work for less. State that has always thought the way to attract business is to kiss their tail. And so maybe that's why, because the contractors, the union contractors, in my case, NECA, National Electrical Contractors Association, they have chosen to be union. They have chosen this path. They invest in this apprenticeship so that these apprenticeships do not cost tuition. They do not cost the kids anything but their time and their effort to learn. They buy books, but they'll have those books to refer to throughout their career.
Right.
Other than that, it doesn't cost them anything because the employers see the value and they invest back into it. It's based on a per man hour work contribution. So the more we work, the more we can afford to train people, the better we can afford to train people.
Right.
And so with the city of Birmingham, what we're telling them is we've got probably fluctuating somewhere around 100 applicants at any one time with zip codes in the city of Birmingham that we don't have a place to put to work. But you still see these crane towers popping up all over downtown Birmingham. Why not require them? And not just the electrical crafts, but all crafts. I just happen to be the squeaky wheel that's making the noise right now.
Right. Well, speaking of making the noise, I mentioned that that interview that you did with Flash was back in September, and you mentioned that it hasn't passed yet. When do you think that y'all are going to be able to get that passed?
There's a diversity study that's going on right now that probably will, when it comes out in the next few weeks, will tie this responsible bidder ordinance to and push it on through. So I expect it sometime very soon. I was hoping to have it by now, but anytime you're lobbying for something, as long as you're continuing that forward momentum, then we're in good shape.
Well, that's great. Glad to hear that. And so let's shift to your apprenticeship program then. Break it down for me. What's the kind of general overview? You got somebody that's like, what are you talking about? Your IBEW 136 apprenticeship program. What do you tell people?
Okay, it's a 5-year program. You earn while you learn. Like I said just a minute ago, there is no tuition. If you complete our program, we have a deal worked out with some of the state colleges around where you'll end up with 50. I think it's either 52 or 54 credit hours towards a 2-year degree. There's another deal with the University of Alabama where you could take that credits and apply. I believe you get 40-something hours credit towards a 4-year degree. Basically, the 2-year degree, you've got everything you need when you graduate except your English classes and those kind of things that as a building trades apprenticeship, we're not going to dig into and teach. Nobody has to write an essay on, something for our apprenticeship. Right. But if you choose to go that route, you can actually even get a 2-year degree that way. It's a fantastic program. Carries you through absolutely not knowing what a screwdriver is all the way through to, there's nothing in the electrical industry that should intimidate you, that you shouldn't be able to figure out and move on and actually deal with. In the process of that, you take classes in the different parts of our industry. We've got motor control labs, we've got transformer labs, fire alarm labs, that sort of thing. And as you progress through there, you're taking these classes and then going back and doing a apprentice competency test so that there are photographic evidence that you have obtained the knowledge level that is necessary in this particular field. And that's always there. That's something nobody can take away from you. It's Matt Dudley's our director, and he has taken what was a warehouse facility over by the airport for FedEx. We bought that building several years ago, and he has turned it into a top-notch school. And I'd be happy to let anybody tour that place and put it up against any other school, craft training school in the state of Alabama.
Yeah.
He does a fantastic job.
And you mentioned that y'all bought it, and that's one of the things that I feel like is so cool about the trades apprenticeship programs is that I wouldn't be opposed to the trades getting taxpayer funding for their apprenticeship program, but the fact of the matter is that they don't. They have like their own buildings, they have their own instructors, they have it is the trade unions pay for it all 100%, whereas a lot of these, even some of these non-union apprenticeship programs, they actually do their training in, we talked a couple weeks ago about this non-union apprenticeship program. They're partnering with Calhoun Community College, and what does that mean? That's a taxpayer subsidy for a non-union apprenticeship program that is ultimately going to cost the apprentice tuition, and they're going to end up making less money in the long term. I mean,
less training.
Yeah,
frankly.
less training, more costs to the taxpayer on both ends because you're subsidizing their education, and then the low wages on the other end because you're going to have to pay for government benefit programs for these people who can't afford. It's just the union apprenticeship programs are really, really an amazing example of workers coming to, like, workers providing for workers and lifting each other up. And so can you talk about the type of benefit packages? Like, what can an apprentice expect to make and receive as benefits during their apprenticeship and then after they graduate?
Yeah, with us, I can speak on the IBEW. I'm not up to date on other crafts and other locals in our area and what their plans are. For us, a brand new green, never been on an electrical project, doesn't know what a screwdriver is, starts out at 50% of a journeyman wage. He'll earn single coverage insurance at first for the first year. That is contractor paid for. He earns, after his second year, starts to earn family coverage insurance so that as a young man, he can afford to get married, afford to start building a family. Mm-hmm. We have 2 defined benefit pensions and 1 defined contribution pension that they will all participate in. One of the 2 defined benefit pensions is attached to his dues payment. A portion of his dues payment goes to it. But the other is a 100% contractor contribution where 3% of his gross wages goes in. And it's based on number of hours worked each year. It's to earn in a year of service credit. And at the end of his career, they add up all his service credits and pay him a monthly check for the rest of his life based on those number of years of service credits. And then we have a defined contribution, and it slowly increases. That contribution rate slowly increases as he progresses through the apprenticeship and all the way up to journeyman, steadily getting larger each year based on an hourly, each man hour they work, and they have a contribution that goes into it. Over the 40 years, this is the Southern Electrical Retirement Fund that it's deposited into. And over the 40 years that it's 43 years it's been in existence, it averages somewhere around just below 8% interest that it's paid every year on average over that. So just figuring that by the time you work 40 hours a year through your career, go in at 20 years old, very easily you're ready to retire as a millionaire with that fund if it maintains that average and
right.
continues on. And 40 years is a pretty good look back to say that's a realistic average for us to expect from it now.
Yeah. And what's y'all's journeyman wage at Local 136?
Journeyman wage at 136 currently is $27 an hour, but we're in negotiations now for the next hopefully a 3-year agreement.
Gotcha. Well, let us know how those negotiations go for sure. And so I appreciate your time, Bill. Definitely keep us in the loop on those negotiations and the responsible bidder ordinance. Once it passes, we'll want to talk about that.
Thank you for pushing the responsible bidder. I think that's, like both of y'all said, it's just such common sense. It's something that regardless of your politics, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or something else, we all want highly trained, competent people doing the work, and we all want our tax dollars to support uplifting the community, and this is a great way to do all that. So appreciate your work on that.
Especially when you start to think about the fact that, hey, I'm going to put my kids to bed in a house that was wired by somebody. Do I want it to be a craftsman, or do I want it to have been just somebody that was task trained?
Yep.
Right.
Every night you go to sleep, you trust that it's going to not interfere with you.
Yep.
To get a haircut, to go into business doing haircutting, you got to get a license. It's not so much that way for the electrician in this state.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Well,
we need to push some things
to,
in that direction too.
Yeah, thanks for working to raise those standards.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
You guys do a fantastic job here with putting out the labor's voice in our area, and I very, very, very much appreciate it, and can't put into words just how important what you guys are doing is. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate
it.
Much. That was Bill Blackman, business agent for IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136. I wanted to mention really quick before we went to the next topic. There was a study out of the Illinois Economic Policy Institute about union apprenticeship programs versus non-union apprenticeship programs for construction workers, and it was really amazing. Listen to this. Quote, "The labor market outcomes of union construction workers are competitive with workers with college degrees, while non-union construction workers are only on par with workers with high school diplomas." What does that mean? Union construction workers earn about $60,000 a year on average, which is 46% more than non-union construction workers at $40,000 a year. 89% of union construction workers have health insurance, compared with just 55% of non-union construction workers, which is a 34% difference. And among all workers with associate's degrees and bachelor's degrees, average incomes range from $48,000 to $68,000, and private health insurance coverage ranges from 84% to 90%. So that these are, when we're talking about these DOL accredited apprenticeship programs, most of those are going to be union apprenticeship programs, and the benefit for the workers is just what I laid out for you there.
It's very clear.
A union construction worker is going to be making about what somebody with a bachelor's degree does. And you cannot, all these people, they go around to high schools and they talk about, the trades are a path to the middle class. Trades are a path to the middle class. And it's like there's an asterisk there. Because if you're a non-union construction worker, we talked a couple of weeks ago about how something like 50% of non-union construction workers are on some sort of government assistance. Non-union construction work is not necessarily a path to the middle class, but union construction work is, and that's why we want to push that. So thanks again, Bill, for taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, and I know we're going to touch on schools later, so I won't belabor the point, but this is just another good time to remind folks that our schools need to be working with folks like Bill to get these young folks who are, in high school into this pipeline so that they can enter a real accredited apprenticeship and have those opportunities you just laid out.
Yep. So the United Launch Alliance is a rocket manufacturer with a facility in Decatur, Alabama. They are unionized and have been for years, their manufacturing staff at least. And the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Launch 44, represents more than 350 manufacturing workers at the Decatur facility. And their contract negotiations are coming up. Their current contract expires in May. I think it's May 1. Every union is going to do this a bit differently, but the machinists going into negotiations, they have a strike sanction vote, which basically empowers the bargaining committee to recommend a strike if negotiations stall. which then has to be approved by the membership again. Okay, so if they go into negotiations, the bargaining committee, and negotiations stall, the company is not budging, and then this strike sanction vote enables them to recommend to the membership a strike, which the membership has to approve again, basically. So they've got 2 votes to actually go through with a strike. So you can't say that the machinist indicator, that some big union boss is telling them to strike, because that's not true. Well, for the first time in the local's 20-year history, 100% of the members of Local 44 Indicator voted yes in the strike sanction vote.
Wow.
Unanimous. Not a single member voted against the strike sanction vote.
It's hard to find 100% agreement on
anything.
Whether the sun is shining.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
So, I know that members Indicator are very unhappy with the company right now, partly because of the way that they dealt with the situation around vaccination, which we've talked about multiple times on the show. But a unanimous strike sanction vote is a very, very powerful bargaining chip going to the table. David Story, founding father of the Valley Labor Report, is the current president of the local, and I asked him if he had any statement for us since we were going to talk about it today. And he said, they'll give us what we want, and I'm going to have to end the quote there because the rest of it is not it's not radio friendly. But suffice it to say is they'll regret it. The company will regret it is one way to say it. He said that, quote, they've made concessions in the last 4 contracts in an effort to be competitive with SpaceX. The last 4 contracts. So we're talking about 15, 20 years. The last 4 contracts, they've made concessions. And he said there will be no concessions on this contract. There will be no concessions. We'll have a reasonable contract, or they'll be working the lines with office staff. So,
and we saw how great that worked out with John Deere.
Right. So we'll, of course, be bringing you some updates as the story develops, and I'm planning to do a couple interviews in the coming months talking to their stewards committee, for one. And I'm really excited for that interview because ULA has been flooding the unit in an effort to dilute the union density. So the stewards committee has been having to go like really, really hard organizing these new members, and they have got basically every single new hire into the union except for 3. And so what that means is in this local where the bargaining unit is over 350 members, they have 3 new hires who are not members of the union, and they have 3 scabs who are not members of the union. People who are not, those scabs are not allowed back in the union because they crossed the picket line in 2018 is my understanding. So to be representing almost like 350, 400 workers and only have like 6 to 10 people that are not members of the union in a right-to-rec state like Alabama, that's huge. They're doing something right over there at the Machinist Union 44 in Decatur. So that's really exciting. And I also want to talk to the bargaining committee about the specific issues that they're going to be fighting for. So we're going to be talking about that over the next couple months. I just wanted to bring you that update really quick. We are going to be talking to, in just a second, William Cardenas. He is an organizer for the Laborers International Union in North America. But first, we're going to go to a break. We will be right back. Support for this program also comes from the Ironworkers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need ironworkers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. it. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
IBEW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBEW is the right choice.
Energy Alabama is a locally operated and membership-based nonprofit organization focused on advancing Alabama's clean energy future through education and advocacy. Many people in charge of infrastructure and building decisions simply don't know how viable clean and renewable energy is, and to that end, Energy Alabama has provided instruction to thousands of adults and tens of thousands of K-12 students across the state, and they are working hard to build careers in clean energy and help everyday Alabamians save money on their utility bills. Learn more about their work and how you can join at energyalabama.org.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys of Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs are proud to represent working people in Alabama and across the Southeast. They have over 100 years of experience representing injured workers in workers' compensation, personal injury, and disability claims. Let their attorneys help you when you get injured on the job. You can find them at www.mtandj.com or 855-617-9333. Let Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs help you when you get injured on the job. Again, the website is www.mtandj.com or the phone number 855-617-9333. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services from other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136, out of Central Alabama. Learn more at IBEW136.org.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. You are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. 844-899-8857. If you want to call or text the show, you can. We've got on the line now William Cardenas. He is an organizer with the Laborers International Union of North America. William, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, Jacob. It's an honor to be here.
Good morning. Good morning. I appreciate your time. So let's talk. Can you talk to us about why you do the work that you do really quickly before we start talking about the job openings in the area? Like, how did you come to this line of work where you've got the Laborers International Union sending you all across the country?
Well, I got to say, I'm very grateful for my union. I had children very young. I didn't graduate college, and I found making money with my hands is something that I enjoyed. I joined the union 21 years ago, February 18th of 2002. And it's been a really good experience. I became a shop steward. I got a lot of leadership development through opportunities through both the AFL, through their CLC program, and then also with my own union. I was able to take some organizing training and I've been pretty good at what I do. Thank God I've been able to make connections across the country, but somebody seen something in me that I did not see. I was given the opportunity to learn how to put people and resources together. And it's been a great experience. And now I'm a regional organizer. I cover 9 states for La Una. I'm a member of an organizing committee called D-Rock, and we cover from Ohio to the Florida Keys. It's about 9 states. And so we focus on recruitment, NLRB style organizing, pressure campaigns, advocacy. And I just love the work that I do and the opportunity to really help people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly how I feel. I'm really thankful to be able to do it. Although I not sure that I would want to be staff, because y'all have to do y'all are working all the time. I mean, like the good staff, good union staff, is not difficult to come by, and they work all the time, round the clock, where since I've got a different job and all my positions are volunteer, I don't get paid for anything that I do. I can just basically say like, oh yeah, I did this one thing for you. You're welcome. Okay. I'm doing it for free, but you actually have some sort of a bit more commitment to the membership than than people like me who do it for volunteers. So I appreciate your work. Folks like you are really important. So,
and William, where are you coming from? Where's home for you?
Yeah.
So I live in Port St. Lucie, Florida. I'm a member of Local 1652, which is based out of South Florida. And I've had the honor and privilege to work with Labor's Local 366 for the last 3 months out of Sheffield, Alabama, but I'm actually home today.
Okay. Well, I could tell that you weren't necessarily from around here when you started talking, but always great to have folks come visit the South and work with us.
So
I say my time in Alabama has been amazing. The people, the food. Let there be no mistake. The labor movement is alive here in Alabama. Jacob, thank you. We did some house calls a couple weeks ago, and I'm telling you, there's a movement here that people just don't recognize, and they need to.
Yeah, Will came with us when the Labor Council went down to make house calls with RWDSU. Will came, and I appreciate him coming. Maybe he'll come with us next Saturday when we go. We'll see. So, Will, here's a question. Why is it important enough for La Una to bring you in to try to spread the news about these job openings and stuff? Like, why not just fill the jobs that you can and then let non-union contractors take the rest of them? Like, why is it important that trade unions try to increase their market share?
So one, it's about standards, safety, retirement with dignity. A good union job, you have respect on the job. The same way the contractor or the company has a contract with whoever they do business with, we believe that us as workers, as labor, we deserve the same rights as anybody they do business with. In particular, in certain cases where there's a huge project, we just come in and assist the local with their efforts, right? So everything from social media to hitting every barbershop, laundromat, community center. I mean, just helping the local build those bridges is what they bring me in for. And hopefully those bridges to the community and that pipeline or workforce stays intact. There's a lot of times where you just need that extra phone call to motivate people to come in. You need that house call to really understand the issues and see if this is the union for them. My union in particular, we do very hard, dirty, dangerous work most of the time, and it's not for everybody. And so if I can help and assist people that are already doing that work to jump on board and hopefully have an opportunity that'll be their last job, like a career, is what our goal is.
So what are the jobs that you're here, that you're stationed in Alabama talking about, trying to make people aware of?
So right now, the Browns Ferry nuclear plant, they were looking to recruit about 100 new members. And I think I need to say this first. When we accept somebody into our union, they become part of our family. For the business manager and the staff of that, that team that holds that local down, that's another family that has to be fed. We need to make sure that we can keep these people working. And so to add 100 people to our list, our out of work list, is not an easy task. It has to be the right type of candidate. But we were recruiting for it's not just for the Browns Ferry nuclear plant, but for the nuclear maintenance industry. So this particular candidate would have to be willing to travel, would have to have a clean background, would have to have some construction experience, must be reliable, right? We train 85 classifications of work. We are the laborers, but we do a lot of work, and want to make sure people know what they're doing and they're committed to coming in. When somebody shows up one day and doesn't show up the next day, it's a skid mark on the rest of us that carry the LaUna name brand.
Right.
And we've been having a really hard, difficult time in just recruiting and retention. People are just union members on payday, and part of my job is to change that culture, right? To have that union culture. You're not just a union member on payday, you're a union member every day. It's about solidarity and being a professional at work.
And so these jobs aren't like, you mentioned, these are not like apprenticeship jobs. These are jobs where you're looking to bring people into the union who have experience in the industry, right?
Correct.
Gotcha. So it's at the Browns Ferry nuclear plant. What kind of work are they going to be doing, and what can they expect for the compensation and stuff like that?
So some of the work that we do at the plants are as follows. We do everything from hull watch, fire watch, flagging, rigging. We assist all the other trades in handling their material. We do site prep, site cleanup. We do some custodial work. We also do some concrete demolition work, concrete work when possible. We do a little bit of everything. We are the first ones on the job, the last ones on the job. And compensation-wise, our rates start at $21.43 an hour. And depending on your skill set, that's the minimum. You can go up from there. It's 7 days a week. I'm sorry, Jacob.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Keep going.
These outages, they're like a tune-up to the nuclear plant. So it requires a lot of manpower. Every trade is bringing in a ton of people. We're going to have 125 to 150 laborers on this project. They'll be working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, or 6/10s, which is 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. So a lot of people are scared to work those hours, but believe me, when you get that check, it really motivates you to keep coming back.
Yeah, and you mentioned that that for y'all specifically, the benefits is really where, as far as compensation goes, the union difference is really found in this area at least. Can you talk about y'all's benefit package versus somebody who's doing the same work with a non-union contractor could expect?
So if you get $21.43 on the check, you can add $7 to $8 on top of that go into your benefits. So some of it goes into training so that you have free training to upgrade your skills. You have money that goes into your pension, which is federally secure, which means that no matter what happens, you will get money when you go to retire. With us, it's 5 years, 1,000 hours. 1,000 hours equals 1 credit per year. And then your benefits. I mean, I have 5 children. I've been in the union. I've never had an issue with my medical insurance. So that's something that's huge, just having family supporting medical benefits and a retirement to look forward to on top of decent pay.
Yeah, that's and the non-union contractors in this industry, the benefits are like not there, right?
Correct. Just to give you an idea, I've been in Alabama for 3 months. I probably spoke to over 425 workers. And a lot of people I talk to, they work for non-union. The majority of the workforce is non-union here. And if I get an opportunity to interview somebody, I try to find out, where did you work? How were the conditions? And a lot of people do not have retirement to look forward to. They make more money in the check sometimes, but there's a lot of wage theft issues. If you're an immigrant worker, there are issues that really hurt them and their families, and they're sort of forced to work in unsafe conditions. Plus, you don't have insurance. So when you go, some people just don't go to the doctor. They rather just stay home and stick it out. And fortunately with COVID and some of the other things that are going on, it's dangerous. At least with us, they have the opportunity to go and get seen.
Where do people go if they want to find out more, if they're interested in applying for this job?
So Labor's Local 366 has a website. It's LIUNA, local366.com. You can also come in person if you're interested. We have a location in Sheffield. which is 1405 Shop Pike, Sheffield. Ray Dawson's the business manager. He's been a laborer for almost 30 years. I trust that man with my life. I'm proud to work shoulder to shoulder with him and his team. And they're looking to expand their market share. Without market share, your wages are tanked, your benefits are tanked. And that's something that we are 100% looking to increase in this area.
Yep.
Glad to hear it.
Liuna366.com. William, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Hey, Jacob, I'd like to say one more thing real quick.
Absolutely. Go for it.
You were talking about responsible bidders ordinances. I've been able to work on 2 successful RBOs in Florida. In states like Alabama, Florida, Georgia, where they have these preemption laws where no matter what we do, it seems to get knocked down by the state legislature. If you have something that can incorporate a CIP, a city infrastructure plan, or a county infrastructure plan, you can really add some regulations to that help working class people. And I think a goal for LaUna is to really get our apprenticeship up and running here in the state of Alabama. And that's where you're going to have people that are loyal to the union, that understand the cause. And these are soldiers for the movement. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Jacob. I'm a big fan of this show, so keep up the good work.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Liuna366.com. So I had an idea for a segment that's basically like, I listened to talk radio this week, so you don't have to, and here's a very dumb thing that I heard. If y'all are interested in making that a regular thing, then let me know. But this week, I heard a few dumb things, and we may be talking about another one of them later in the show, but I wanted to use this to jump it off as a jumping off point to talk about inflation. So, Adam, let's go ahead and just play the clip, the minimum wage clip.
All righty.
All right, Prince William, what are you hating on?
I'm hating on all the people that are that at first thought that Amazon was the standard, raising their minimum wage and
okay, hold on, pause.
More benefits, and they're like,
thinks
this is the company that we can.
Who are the people that he's talking about
the company
that think
we want to be the role model? And then Amazon's just like, watch this, and they raise their prices of Prime membership now. Starting next month, it'll be like $20-$30 more for Prime membership for the year, $2 a month. And everyone's like, what happened? How could Amazon do this? Why are they doing this? And they just don't understand that this always happens. This is why raising minimum wage is stupid, because the company is not going to lose their profit margins that they had before. They're just going to raise prices, and people don't understand that. It's ridiculous.
All right. So, first of all, I mean, who is the person that he's responding to here that thinks that when Amazon said they were going to raise their minimum wage to $15 an hour, were like groveling at their feet? Like, I don't even, who did that? That's not like, that's a minimum. That's like, okay, you're paying your workers for warehouse work $30,000 a year. Like, oh, wow, congrats.
I may be jumping ahead of you, Jacob, but I'm just so sick of hearing that argument about the minimum wage. And it really applies to wages in general.
Yeah.
And you've heard that since time immemorial. Since the minimum wage was instituted in the 1930s, you've been hearing this argument. I will say that it's true what he said about Amazon doesn't want to lose their profit margins. Well, of course, that's true. But if we just accept this argument, well, if we raise wages, the company will just raise prices and it'll all wash out. Well, then what's the point of ever raising wages, right? I mean, by that, the extension is we should never raise the minimum wage.
Or anybody's wages.
Because, capital will just eat that up. So we're just hostage, I suppose, is what they're proposing.
Right. I mean, look, William, the guy here, he's like a young guy. I think he's younger than me. And, like, I don't necessarily fault him for thinking these things because that's what we're taught here. We are taught, and, especially if you work at a conservative talk radio station, and if you've never challenged yourself or had others challenge you, then, it's not surprising that you're going to think the same thing as literally everybody else that you've ever met in your life. Okay. And we're taught basically that anytime there's a problem in society, the reason for that problem is the little people.
Yeah.
Are wages going down? it's the immigrants. Somebody got hurt at work, she could have worked safer. Education's bad, it's probably the teachers. When prices go up, it's probably the workers rolling in their $30,000 a year. That's probably what's happening. And now when you say it like that, I do think that you can start to see how absurd this line of logic is. But let's investigate it a little bit further. How much profits did Amazon make last year before they raised their Prime membership price, which is what he was talking about, which is why he's saying they don't want to lose their profits, so they're raising they don't want to lose profits from the higher wages that they're paying right now, and so they're gonna raise the Prime price. How much profits did Amazon make last year? $33.4 billion in 2021 alone. That's money that's profits. For an Econ 101 lesson for everybody out there, profits is the money that's left over after everything else is paid for. If you gave just half of that to the workers in the form of a wage increase, you could give every single Amazon employee in the world, all 1.3 million of them, a $6 an hour raise. If you just take half of those profits, that means you've still got over $15 billion that's just sitting there, that's like not been used on anything. That's before the Prime price increase. What about the $30 million that they spent just last year fighting one union campaign in Bessemer, Alabama? Those union busters made hundreds of dollars an hour, not 15. But of course, they're not going to be blamed on the Dale Jackson show. It's the workers making $30,000 a year.
And I think it's also revealing that folks identify as a consumer first and not part of a working class.
Yeah.
And that's by design.
Yeah, of course. Let's play this clip from a More Perfect Union video last year about this issue.
Let's look at some corporate earnings calls. That's where companies tell investors how much money the company is making and their plans to make more. A study by Bank of America found that these reports mentioned inflation 1,100% more in the second quarter of 2021 than in the previous year. But while they blame inflation for rising prices, the largest corporations in America have never made more money. The Wall Street Journal reported that 2 out of 3 of the biggest U.S. publicly traded companies had larger profit margins this year than they did prior to the pandemic in 2019. Nearly 100 of these massive corporations reported profits in 2021 that are 50% above profit margins in 2019. This is a clip from the 2021 third quarter earnings of Tyson, the meat processor whose chicken you might have in your freezer.
We have increased prices to help offset significant raw material and supply chain cost inflation. Pricings improved nearly 16% in the quarter versus the comparable period last year.
Some quick business talk translation. When he says pricing improved, he means Tyson was happy to raise prices, and that was good news for Tyson shareholders. Tyson's wants people like you and me to believe that they were forced to raise prices as a result of inflation. But the company is making almost double what it made the year before. Inflation gave them the excuse they needed to raise prices and reap record profits. Here's legendary investor Warren Buffett explaining that businesses are finding they can simply raise prices without it hurting their sales.
It's very interesting. I mean, we're raising prices. People are raising prices to us.
Yeah. So, there we have 3 out of the 4 of these companies. They had 50% higher profits in 2020 than in 2019. This was a video that was made in 2021. They're raising these prices after record profits, and then they're blaming it on they're blaming the wage hike or the price hike on higher wages. They made more profits, 50% more, and then they raised the prices. And they put out press releases saying, we're raising prices because of wages. And people like William on the Dale Jackson show and people like Dale Jackson just regurgitate it. They just say, oh, the boss said it. I don't know. I guess it's true. The boss said it. I guess it's true. To bring it back to that first clip, these people are pissing down our backs, and the folks on the Dale Jackson show are telling us it's raining. It's insane.
And something we mentioned off the air this morning was talking about monopoly power in the way in which that is so impacting this inflation phenomena, but it's really been left out of the conversation. When you have companies like Tyson that dominate their industry, dominate the market share, they don't have the competition.
Right.
You know, Amazon can raise their prices because where are we going to go? You know, Amazon has a bigger profit share and a bigger dominance in the industry than some countries' entire GDP.
Mm-hmm.
It's so I think that's also worth remembering, that as the decades have progressed, we've had a concentration in industry after industry after industry. I mean, whether it's cat food, chicken nuggets, clothing products, beer, cigarettes, you name it, chances are there's about 2 or 3 companies that control the overwhelming majority of the market.
Yeah.
So, but again, you don't hear that being discussed as part of inflation.
Right.
You know, maybe they're pointing to, real life things such as COVID and some of the supply chain issues that have in part resulted from COVID, but also because of, another factor here is the just-in-time manufacturing and distribution model.
Right.
And so companies have over time changed practices to try to squeeze out every little drop of profit they can without any consideration for, long-term planning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most capitalists don't think beyond the next quarter.
Right.
So, they have low inventories, they have very complicated shipping and distribution mechanisms that span multiple countries, and that may be slightly more profitable in an average quarter, but throw in a worldwide pandemic and that sort of changes things.
Exactly. Let's go ahead and go to a break, and we will be right back. And we're going to talk about school privatization and why, like all privatization, it's bad. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. Stay tuned. Energy Alabama supports consumers and is a leader in advocating for them. They have been able to successfully fight off utility rate increases in the state, reduce fees for electric vehicles, increase electric vehicle infrastructure spending, and they secured a $100 million refund by Alabama Power after the utility overcharged customers for fuel. To learn more about their work advocating for customers and to join the fight, go to energyalabama.org.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBEW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBEW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBEW558.org.
The attorneys of Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs are proud to represent working people in Alabama and across the Southeast. They have over 100 years of experience representing injured workers in workers' compensation, personal injury, and disability claims. Let their attorneys help you when you get injured on the job. You can find them at www.mtandj.com or 855-617-9333. Let Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs help you when you get injured on the job. Again, the website is www.mtandj.com or the phone number 855-617-9333. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services from other law firms. North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at IAMAW44.org.
Hometown Action is a proud sponsor of the Valley Labor Report, and we're here to help keep you in the loop on the assault on your right to protest, picket, and peaceably assemble in Alabama. The anti-protest bill is back this year, and it's as bad as ever. There is huge interest in building worker power and increasing unionization in Alabama that has corporations scared. Don't let their influence on our state legislators become another tool to arrest striking workers and union supporters. This racist bill is especially problematic for black organizers and unnecessarily gives law enforcement broad discretion to define even small peaceful gatherings as a riot. Tell your Alabama legislators to say no to House Bill 2. We've set up an easy way for you to do that. You can go to hmtn.link/HB2, where you'll find more information and an email template you can use right from your smartphone. That link is hmtn.link/HB2. You'll also find more info on social media at Hometown Action.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'll tell how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Oh my gosh, sorry about that. So we are discussing school privatization and why it's bad. So privatization is about putting public dollars into private hands. And there are so many different ways that they can do that. And, you know, the school vouchers that's kind of the extreme example in education. But if there is a way to make a profit off of public services, folks have found a way and are always pushing the envelope. So there's a couple of things here you mentioned in the lead up to this discussion. For example, Del Marsh, he is a longtime opponent of public education in this state. He spent the better part of the last decade and a half or so doing everything in his power. Most of that time, he was the pro tem of the Senate. He's been using his influence, often backed by out-of-state, billionaire-backed, organizations, to attack public schools, to attack public school employees, who are about 75% female and disproportionately unionized compared to the private industry and the rest of the country, and certainly the rest of the state. And so he has gone after the employees, gone after the schools, and it's all pitched with the idea that maybe you, as the individual family or parent or student, could benefit from this. And what we're being asked to accept here is that we abandon the concept of public good. We abandon the concept that every child deserves a great public education, because that's not what this is promising. I mean, and if you read what they say, they do more or less give that up, that it is maybe you, as the Jones family, the Smith family, maybe you get to be the winners in this marketplace, this Wild West marketplace of education. Just like maybe you get to be the winner in the broader marketplace. But more often than not, you're probably going to be the loser. But hey, for those who are already winning, who are already sending their children to private schools, now they get a little subsidy from the state. Because that's one of the other pieces to privatization. It's not just about putting public dollars into private hands. It's about concentrating those dollars into the hands that already have plenty of dollars. It's not, a redistribution of wealth from the public coffers down to the bottom. And this is going to be pitched, I know, as a way to help low-income families. And that's a really old trope. Charter school movement, the school voucher movement, and the broader, corporate education reform has often couched their rhetoric and their policy proposals in the language of civil rights. They love to find, a poor black family that they can put out front in the camera to be the face of what they're really trying to do, which is to enrich themselves, their rich buddies, at the expense of the students and educators and really the broader community. So in state after state where school privatization has advanced farther than Alabama, it has been an absolute disaster for everyone involved except for those making money off of it. You can find no evidence where this is improving student instruction, student achievement. And again, that's one of the ostensible reasons behind this pitch is, I think Del Marsh even mentioned it in one of his early interviews that, the Alabama is 50th in academic rankings, and so we just can't accept that. We've got to do something, which is interesting because we're also at or near the bottom of every quality of life metric in this state, from incarceration to poverty to healthcare. Just this week, we had another study indicated that Alabama, I believe, is 49th out of 51 for life expectancy. Now, where's Del Marsh telling us we can't accept that? Right. We might actually provide healthcare to folks. We might actually have good union jobs available for folks. We might have mental health care for folks. So that is on its surface pretty laughable that we're supposed to accept that we have to do this because Alabama's ranked so poorly. But we can't extend that logic to any other sector of our economy, of our broader society. Okay, so that's BS. And we also have to remember that when we say that Alabama's ranked, these are rankings based primarily on standardized test scores. And, capitalists love to be able to quantify things, to drill things down to a metric that can be put on a spreadsheet. And education's just not that way. But they have really tried, especially over the past couple of decades. It amped up a lot after No Child Left Behind was passed in 2001 at the federal level, where it's not so much about teaching, it's about testing. And what you're trying to measure here are these standardized test scores and collect the data so that you can then rank and sort. You can label some schools failing and some schools successful. You can label some teachers to be failures and others to be successful based on these metrics, which there's now a plethora of research to confirm that these standardized tests primarily are indicating demographics.
Mm-hmm.
You show me a school with very poor standardized test scores, I'm going to show you a school with high poverty.
Right.
There's a lot of talk about the achievement gap. And the disparities in student achievement across race and across class. But again, these are not solutions to these issues. The solutions would be an excellent public education as a foundation for every child in every community. Shouldn't matter what zip code you're in. Shouldn't matter your race. You shouldn't have to move to a new neighborhood. You shouldn't have to go shop the marketplace to get a good education. That should be your right.
Right.
That should be a fundamental assumption. At the bare minimum, you're going to get a great public education. And what does that look like? Well, it's for one thing, it's the educators themselves running the show, and not bureaucrats 1,000 miles away, not private vendors who are selling something. It's educators who actually know their kids, know their communities, know their jobs.
Right. And that's the thing that you mentioned that they were promising primarily is that an individual, as an individual family, might be able to get a better education under this program. And even that is dubious.
It is.
Because on average, voucher students in Milwaukee, and this is basically the same, all of these studies are basically the same, but on average, voucher students in Milwaukee performed either the same or possibly slightly worse than public school students on state exams, even though voucher students are slightly less poor than public school students. And that is... And all of these studies basically show the same thing. There was a couple other studies that I pulled. In Louisiana, after 2 years in the program, a student who started at the 53rd percentile dropped to 37th percentile in math. By and large, those negative effects persisted through year 4. In Indiana, students in the program saw initial dips in math that persisted for 4 years. An earlier version of the same study found some evidence of a bounce back among students who remained in private schools. The Ohio study showed that even after 3 years in the program, the negative impacts of using a private school voucher persisted. D.C. tells a slightly different story. In D.C., they found that students' test scores fell 2 years into the program, but by year 3, they had no clear effect. Some studies show modest improvement, but the overall trend is clearly that they don't improve even the students who take advantage of the voucher, not to mention the public schools who are left with less funding.
Right. And let's talk about that for a sec, on how it impacts those who are left behind. Because when we talk about school choice, it's best to understand that it's the school choosing who they're going to serve. That's really what they mean by school choice. Because you as a student or as a parent, your choices are going to be still limited by your zip code, your income level, your education background, the resources you have to bring to this decision-making process. Those don't go away just because the state promises you, a $5,500 voucher. Nor does it erase the private schools and charter schools' incentive to select their student population in such a way that is going to be cost effective and produce the results they want to produce. And that makes it all the more stunning that, study after study, as you showed, does not show any improvement, because these schools in many cases are actively selecting who they are going to serve and who they are going to test. So they've already, sort of picked off the cream of the crop. And what I mean by that is, if you are a student who speaks English as a second or third language, if you are a student with special needs who requires resources, whether that's additional workers, a one-on-one aid or special technology, whatever it may be, you have a student with behavioral issues. These students who are perhaps harder to educate, more expensive to educate, they find themselves conveniently expelled, counseled out, and pushed out of these programs.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, there's already sort of a selection in the fact that the most desperate families often are not going to even be able to enter into this, jump through the hoops to get through to a charter school selection or to a private school voucher.
Right.
So, again, and what that leaves the public schools with are all the students that the private and charter schools don't want.
Mm-hmm.
The ones who are the most difficult, the ones who do require the most help, the ones who are going to perform the poorest on the test scores, which is the end-all, be-all, in the eyes of legislators and mainstream media.
Right. And so, Adam, one of the things that proponents of this bill will say when they hear somebody oppose it, they'll say, you want the status quo. We're 50th or 51st in education, and we don't think that's acceptable. At least we're proposing something, and so they say that by opposing this, we're in favor of the status quo, and also that educators have been running the school system for decades, and look where it's got us. Do educators run the school system, and do they support the status quo?
Well, let's say the status quo is a reflection of over 10 years of Republican rule in Montgomery. So if there is, in fact, a status quo that is failing, it is a reflection of Dale Marsh and the people who back him and his colleagues who have implemented the policies we've been under for over a decade. It was them who decided to water down job protections for employees. It was them who decided to water down the pension benefits of employees. And then, lo and behold, we have a tough time recruiting educators and retaining educators. It was them who started the charter schools. They established the private school scholarships. They have funneled hundreds of millions of dollars out of the Education Trust Fund. And this was after some of the steepest cuts in the country in the aftermath of the Great Recession. So all their bragging these past few years about, growing the budget and catching up with salary increases, that's just making up for lost time and lost investments.
Right.
In the several years after the recession. We're just catching up for the cuts, catching up for inflation. So it's nothing to brag about. But no, educators do not run the system, nor are we in favor of the status quo. If we ran things, we would actually have class size limits. We would have real enforceable case size limits for special education teachers and speech pathologists and counselors. We would have more counselors and mental health services. We would actually have the people, the warm bodies in the building. And that's typically the greatest expense in your school budgets. It's the warm bodies in the building. And yes, it comes with cost, but that's what you need to be able to educate kids, especially in a place like Alabama, where so many of our kids are coming to us behind. By the time they enter kindergarten, they're already behind many of their peers in wealthier societies, wealthier communities. And so when you have students who are coming to you who have not had quality child care, who, may be staying with a grandmama, they may not have stable housing, they may not have two college-educated parents bringing home, middle-income salaries. They may not even have reliable health care. They may have never been to a doctor. When you have those kind of students coming to you, it is tougher to get them to, these magical metrics that these folks want to see on these test scores.
Yeah.
So it's a distraction, and part of it is, we've been in this era of corporate education reform and school privatization for decades now. I mentioned 2001, No Child Left Behind. That's a good watermark. And it's very clear it has failed. It has failed by every metric involved with quality of life for the people in our schools, student and teacher. And it has failed our communities. It's failed the taxpayers. The only place that hasn't failed is in the private investors and the folks who have made a lot of money off of this. And, here in Huntsville City Schools is ground zero for this kind of garbage across the state, where they've outsourced hundreds of jobs that used to actually go to the public school system, people who had a retirement pension and health care. Yeah, those are all filled by temp agencies now, where they're paying on pennies on a dollar. They have no rights, no job security, no health care, no retirement. And that has happened in section after section after section of our school staffing.
Yeah.
And you've had millions of dollars funneled into various consultants and vendors, textbook publishers. So, educators are not in charge.
Right.
Billionaires, their think tanks, education technology corporations, Pearson, those are the folks that are in charge. It's not us. And to the extent that we have oversight and input, it is through organizing and it is through the public system. Because we still, in most places, get to elect a public school board. We still have 2 public budget hearings where we are allowed to go and get a copy of the budget and ask questions. And these folks want to do away with that.
Yeah.
The Netflix CEO, Hastings, he's a big charter school guy, and he's bragged about he wants to get rid of elected school boards in this country.
Right.
So that's what they're offering is less input from we the people, less buy-in from we the people, and hope that you're one of the lucky winners in the marketplace.
Right.
But to hell with everybody else. It's obscene, and educators have a responsibility, I think, to share what's really happening with their community, with their neighbors, their friends, their family, so that folks know what's going on and aren't as fooled by the propaganda that does come well-funded by the Walton families and the Bill Gateses and the Eli Broads of the world, and is then propagated and turned into legislation by the crooks like Del Marsh.
So bottom line, legislation like this has been tried across the country, and you do not see the proponents of this bill pushing the results. What you see is a conceptual argument that competition always improves things. You do not see them pointing to the results because the results are not good. The results are not good for the people who take advantage of the voucher program, nor are they good for the people who are left behind in the schools that have less funding. That's just an empirical reality. These programs do not improve performance. Opposing this bill does not mean you're in favor of the status quo. Opposing this bill just means you don't want it to get worse.
Absolutely.
What teachers and educators want are the things like Adam said. And we can see this if they were actually interested in increasing performance in schools instead of interested in advancing an ideological agenda that benefits their corporate donors. They would be pushing the things that actually work. And we can see what actually works in Alabama because there are high poverty schools that perform really, really, really well. And what do they all have in common? Teachers have high expectations for the students and are invested. Teachers take control of the things that they can control. There is plentiful support to help teachers get better at both what they know and how to teach it. constant assessment of where students are at and what they need help with, and leverage of strong community support. Why do they not pass bills that go to those things, that decrease class sizes, that increase staffing in support roles like nursing and counseling and student aides? Why don't they advance bills that do this instead of advancing bills that have been shown time and time again to not increase performance for anybody, that only increase the performance of the line on an investor's stock portfolio? That's what they're pushing. They're not pushing things that have been proven to actually increase student performance or educator well-being. And that is the issue with this bill. That's why we're opposed to it, and that's why everybody else should be opposed to it. Improve education, not deteriorate it.
Yeah, and before we end, I think we'd be remiss to not mention the other major piece of this, beyond pure profit, is segregation.
Oh, right.
It's not a coincidence that school vouchers came in the aftermath of Brown versus Board. It's not a coincidence that these church schools and segregation academies, became very obsessed with leveraging tax credits and government support for what they were doing, which is segregation. And that's segregation by not just race, but by class, by ability, by language, by ethnicity, religion. We can't move backwards.
Yeah.
This is moving backwards. This is rolling back the status quo.
Exactly. So we're wrapping up here on the radio. We don't have time to play that voicemail, but we got a voicemail from Joe thanking us for our participation in the DSA for UMWA fundraiser. We appreciate your voicemail, Joe, and that kills two birds with one stone. You can go back and watch the fundraising stream or listen to it wherever you get your podcasts, and you can leave us a voicemail, 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. Give us money, unionly.io/o/TVLR to help us stay on the air, and want to give one quick shout out to Joe Harrison. He has been helping us on the YouTube, doing our clips, doing the thumbnails and everything, and give Joe a round of applause. Woo! He's been doing really, really good. We appreciate his help on the back end with those things. So folks, that is it for us on the radio today, but if you find us online, you can stay tuned for Overtime. You can stay tuned for Overtime, where we are going to talk to Dan Dimaggio from LaborNotes about GM workers in Mexico winning an independent union. We're going to be talking about Marco Rubio trying to reinstitute company unions in the United States, and we're going to get to a couple things that we missed about the legislative session and last week in Southern labor, all in Overtime online. All power to the workers. We'll see you next week. Okay, let's cut it. All right, we got rid of those radio folks. So howdy, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for staying with us. We've got a great Overtime lined up for you. We're going to take a short break, and we will be right back. Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and Dan can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
IBEW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBEW is the right choice.
Energy Alabama is a locally operated and membership-based nonprofit organization focused on advancing Alabama's clean energy future through education and advocacy. Many people in charge of infrastructure and building decisions simply don't know how viable clean and renewable energy is, and to that end, Energy Alabama has provided instruction to thousands of adults and tens of thousands of K-12 students across the state, and they are working hard to build careers in clean energy and help everyday Alabamians save money on their utility bills. Learn more about their work and how you can join at energyalabama.org.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys of Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs are proud to represent working people in Alabama and across the Southeast. They have over 100 years of experience representing injured workers in workers' compensation, personal injury, and disability claims. Let their attorneys help you when you get injured on the job. You can find them at www.mtandj.com or 855-617-9333. Let Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs help you when you get injured on the job. Again, the website is www.mtandj.com or the phone number 855-617-9333. No representation is made that the quality of legal services is greater than the quality of legal services from other law firms. Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers.
Do you, I'll tell how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio show, and we are now in overtime, and we've got some good stuff today. We are talking company unions, getting to a couple things that we didn't get to in the main show. We're going to get to a couple of bills that are going through the legislative session, some of the contradictory positions that are going on there. We're going to get to last week in Southern Labor. But first, we're talking company unions. First, we're going to be talking to Dan Dimaggio from LaborNotes, and then we're going to be diving into Marco Rubio's company union bill. So let's get started.
Before we talk with Dan, I just want to thank everybody for listening so far and apologize for a couple of weird transitions there. I guess I was just so pissed about school vouchers that messed up a couple transitions today. So y'all bear with us. I appreciate it. Thanks for everyone who's been tuning in so far.
Absolutely.
And absolutely appreciate Dan coming in. Dan the man Dimaggio.
Dan was a researcher for the operating engineers before he came to LaborNotes, which I didn't know until I was trying to get a bio for him.
Well, and I see he's already dropped a link to a monthly review article he wrote many years ago, which brings back flashbacks because I remember reading that article when it came out.
Wow.
Been following Dan's stuff for a long time on LaborNotes. Great guy.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. You guys are doing great work.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, I really, really appreciate what y'all do at LaborNotes. I am subscribed, like any good lefty, to many a magazine, and the only ones that I religiously read and make sure that I read cover to cover are LaborNotes and In These Times. Those are the only ones that I always make sure that I read.
Yeah, second that.
So we're talking about the defeat of company unions in Mexico. You and Luis Leon have been following this story for LaborNotes for a while now. Was going to try to get Luis on as well, but it is his birthday. So happy birthday, Luis. Dan is going to be taking over for him today. But can you explain to the audience what are company unions?
Well, so in the Mexican context, you have unions that essentially sign contracts behind the backs of the workers, often before any workers are hired, with employers like General Motors or many multinational employers that operate in Mexico, and those contracts. The workers oftentimes don't know anything about them, are unaware or only vaguely aware that dues are being taken out, and they lock in low wages, they lock in poor working conditions, and they crucially preclude the possibility of forming a genuine independent union. And this is the most common type of contract, and the most common type of union that exists in Mexico. And there are we can talk about this. There are genuine independent unions in Mexico who are fighting the good fight, and there's a major effort underway to reform the Mexican labor movement and build more democratic independent unions. But
right. Well, I think that the explanation of what they are basically also explains like why they're bad. If you're going to have a union, you're going to have an organization of workers. You want it to be democratic. You want it to be transparent. You want it to be accountable to the membership. And there are several unions in Mexico that are just simply not. Why are they so prevalent in Mexico?
So just to give the example of the union at the General Motors plant in Silao, this was a union, the Miguel Trujillo Lopez local of the Confederation of Mexican Labor, the CTM, which is the largest union confederation in Mexico. And this particular, I shouldn't say local, this particular national union, it's a national auto industry union with 120 contracts, and it's headed by a senator, Teresa Medina, from the long-ruling Institutional Revolutionary Party.
Well, that's a red flag right there. If a sitting senator is in charge, and not the good kind of red flag.
Yeah, I mean, this has been the the model. So many of the union leaders in Mexico of these types of unions are extremely powerful people, and leverage their base, into congressional seats or seats in the Mexican Senate. The reason it's been so dominant there, I think there are a couple of things. I mean, one, you have all of these multinational corporations looking for cheap labor, and moving to Mexico and willingly, operating with this model of unions and signing these agreements and essentially, designing their investment strategy in Mexico around their ability to secure what's called a protection contract, which means it protects the employer from the workers. But also because of the Mexican government's turn to neoliberalism, and its desire to, basically its development strategy. to, which was based on cheap labor and, you know, attracting this type of investment and saying, yes, come here, the workers will have no ability to raise their wages or, you know, or put up a real fight. And there are, you know, a tremendous amount of legal and political obstacles to workers who have sought to form independent unions, and those are being those barriers are being lowered now under the recent labor law reform, which is a positive development. But
what were some of those barriers to independent unionism?
So you have these. So with the protection contracts, workers would say, okay, we'd like to form a real union here. We'd like to form an independent union, and they could go to the labor authorities, and the labor authorities would say, well, it turns out you guys already have a contract, with this other union, and and then would erect all sorts of obstacles, procedural obstacles, saying, you didn't address your letter, your petition to the right person. Your union is not registered. Or if they could get as far as like, okay, well, now we're going to have a vote over who will have the contract at this facility. There were cases where the board would say, okay, and the vote's tomorrow. So like an independent union that had been operating underground or so, would have to emerge, and decide if they could do something within 24 hours, or, there's just workers would be fired, by the dozens, if they came out in support of an independent union effort, and nothing was done about that. And of course, there's lots of violence and thuggery, directed at them as well.
How were these barriers lowered? Like, what was the labor law reform that is making it easier for workers to form independent unions?
Right. So for many years, the independent union movement in Mexico has pushed for labor law reform and made it an international issue, bringing it before the ILO, and also gaining some support and increasing levels of support from allies in the U.S. labor movement and in Canada. Eventually, there was a new government elected in 2018, the Morena government, with the President AMLO, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, and they passed a historic labor law reform that went into effect on May 1st, 2019, which includes a number of extremely important provisions. I should also say that there was a, part of this some portion of the credit should also go to the labor provisions that are included in the USMCA, the successor to NAFTA, which does have some significant advances on previous trade agreements, and did put pressure on the Mexican government to enact this reform. But also a lot of the credit goes to the most of the credit should go to the independent union movement in Mexico that's been pushing for this, and some of the credit goes to the Mexican government under this new more left-wing party, more progressive party. So some of the provisions of the under the labor law reform are, one, that workers have the right to see their collective bargaining agreements. So that is basic. But nice. Most workers, there are something like 500,000 collective bargaining agreements, contracts in Mexico. I think by the estimate I've heard is that only 100,000 of them actually are still in existence. The other ones are out of date, or just the union doesn't function or the company is shut down. But so let's say there's 100,000, but most of those workers have not seen most of those. But so the other thing is that all of those collective bargaining agreements have to be legitimated, brought to a vote of the workers in the workplace before May 1st, 2023. So that is so far. So that's a positive development, and so workers have the right to say, in the legitimation vote, they can say, we want to get rid of this union that we've had here, this protection union, and that opens, if a majority of them vote against the contract, that opens the path towards forming a democratic independent union or a new union, towards bringing a new union in. Thus far, let me say some other things. Also, the right to, and a big difference about those votes, or something important, is that they are secret ballot votes. On the collective bargaining agreements, like workers also now have the right to choose their union representatives. Like that's a part of the law as well. Their union leadership, I should say. And it also creates a system it strengthens the labor boards in Mexico and makes them a part of the judiciary rather than the previous system that existed, which was these tripartite conciliation boards, which allowed for a lot of corruption and were a pillar of maintaining the company union protection union system. So those are some of the things, but so far, so I said there are 100,000 contracts covering Mexican workers. So far, only 3,000 of them, less than 3,000, have been brought to a legitimation vote. And out of those, less than 1% of those votes have workers decided to ditch their existing union and open the possibility towards forming a new union. So
why do you think that is, that of these 3,000, only 1% have voted to go towards a new union, when we know that, how many of those 3,000 would we say are company unions?
Most of them. So
contracts that are administered by company unions, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the Secretary of Labor, Luisa Maria Alcalde, whose background is actually, has strong family ties to the independent democratic union movement in Mexico. So she estimates that 80 to 85% of all the contracts in Mexico are protection union contracts. So the vast majority of the 3,000 that have been voted on so far are protection contracts. The reason why it's been so difficult is, one, it takes a lot to organize to win a vote on this stuff, and there has not been much space for organizing in anywhere in Mexico for workers to organize because of the fear that exists, because of the the fear that you're going to be fired. And another thing is that the protection unions continue to threaten workers by saying, if you vote against legitimating the contract, you will lose all your benefits. You won't have a contract anymore. The company will do whatever it wants to. And a third reason, all of that is false, by the way.
Right.
If workers vote against legitimation, the terms of the contract remain in place. They just open the path for a new union to take it over and negotiate a new contract. The third thing is that the unions will say, well, do you want to keep your jobs? If you vote to delegitimate the contract and you bring in an independent democratic union, then the company's going to say, oh, we're going to leave. We're going to go back to the US. We're going to go to Canada or we're going to go somewhere else. So because it would destabilize the the system of labor relations that exists in Mexico. So these are some of the obstacles, but I think the biggest one is just the lack of organization that exists so far. So a big difference at the General Motors plant in Silao, which I know we're going to get into, but a big difference there where workers just voted, workers last year voted to delegitimate their contract and just recently voted to form an independent union. Big difference there was they had 2 years of organizing behind them, starting back in 2019, and that just doesn't exist everywhere. So it's a challenge.
Right.
It's an opportunity and a challenge.
Dan, I was going to maybe clarify something. Did you say about 80 to 85% of contracts and unions are more or less protection unions, company unions?
Yes, according to Mexico's Secretary of Labor.
So would it, I mean, from what you've done research-wise, would you say that has impacted people's perceptions of unions? I mean, if your common experience as workers is with these fraudulent organizations that are more, in favor of the company than they are for you, I imagine there's going to be some people turned off by like just the word union. It's going to be a turnoff for folks. And, I wonder if that's impacted the growth and the independent movement and maybe kept some folks from pursuing organizing opportunities just because their reputation and what they've experienced has been so bad.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's another challenge. To when workers, vote to delegitimate their contract, then they have to form a new union. But it's a challenge to the new unions to say we're different,
right?
And to really show that. So you're absolutely right.
So the last thing before we go to get actually into Silao, we had somebody in the chat asked, are these so-called unions the same as the CLC unions in Canada? And what I think he's asking there is, are they in the same federation as the AFL-CIO CLC? The answer to that's no, right?
Do you mean the same like international federation or not anymore? They were kicked out of the international federations. The AFL-CIO does not have any relationship with the CTM, for example, anymore. Though it did once upon a time. Really? It did historically, yeah.
Wow.
And the CTM was not always this way, to be clear, either. But it has been for a while, for many decades. So.
Interesting.
Well, I see what Jeb is talking about. He's referring to the Christian Labor Association of Canada, the CLAC.
I thought that was just a typo. I thought he meant CLC because the AFL-CIO CLC is the American Canadian Labor Federation. CLC stands for Canadian Labor Congress, but CLAC is actually.
Ironically, I did some research on this organization when I was at the operating engineers. A decade ago or something.
And we have, even here in Alabama and across the South, you can find like Christian Educators Association and things of that nature that are like, trying to emulate the company union kind of model. And
but
in this case, they'll just say, we'll provide you liability insurance if you get sued, and we'll also pray for you. If the boss calls you in, we'll pray for you. We can't give you a lawyer, but we'll pray for you.
Oh man!
But it's similar. It is very similar actually, in that there are companies in Canada, in particular, construction companies who have turned to the CLAC and signed agreements with them to prevent other unions from coming in and organizing the workers. And so they get these sweetheart deals, where the wages are lower and there's and the conditions are much worse. So I think that was the case in, I think some of the work in the North, like the tar sands work
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate Jeb.
That's very similar.
Good
Yeah.
comment there. That's a way to
fascinating.
connect the dots. And I imagine those are not the kind of unions that are going to give you a vigorous defense should you be hurt on the job or unjustly terminated. And so, yeah, it seems to be a major trend. And appreciate all y'all kind of tying this together for us.
Well, so Dan, let's talk about Silao then. You said that they have been organizing there since 2019. Can you talk about how they began resisting their company union down there?
I mean, some workers came together, formed this organization, Generando Movimiento, generating movement, a play on General Motors. Just saying we should have a genuine union. They said they called it that because, the conditions that General Motors forces on them, generates some movement, some opposition, some resistance. But they were pushing for things like an end to like a 40-hour work week instead of a 48-hour work week. They work 4 12-hour shifts now. Like access to bathroom breaks, and again, just like saying, well, we should have a real union that fights for us, that doesn't fight against us. And in 2019, they actually organized some solidarity with the striking General Motors workers in the U.S. On their own initiative, saying we are going to refuse overtime. So that they can't make up for production loss in the U.S. By producing more here in Mexico, because the workers at the plant produce the Chevy Silverado and the GMC Sierra as these extraordinarily profitable pickups, which are then mainly exported to the U.S. So that was the start, and then 18 of them got fired for under a variety of different pretexts, but they kept fighting for their jobs back, and they kept organizing in the plant, over the last couple of years, and eventually when the union brought the contract for legitimation vote in, I believe it was April of last year, April 2021, they were winning the vote. Workers were about to vote it down when suddenly somebody broke into the ballot, into the ballot boxes, and and then they and tried to tamper with the results of the election. So a new election was scheduled thanks to pressure from the U.S. government and the Mexican Secretary of Labor. So a new election was scheduled for last August, and workers in that election voted 60% against legitimating the contract, and that opened up the possibility of forming a new union, which they just did. So the election was, if you want me to just get into that.
Go. Yeah.
The election was at the beginning of February 1st and 2nd. You have, this is a massive plant, 6,500 workers in this plant. And it was unclear, what the outcome was going to be. In December, Cintia, stands for the Independent National Auto Workers Union, which came out of this generating movement group, or it's linked to that. They filed their 30% of signatures, or at least 30% of signatures, to take over the contract at the Silao plant. But then, within 10 days, 3 other unions also filed, supposedly with 30% of signatures each. Workers can sign to support more than one union to get on the ballot and forcing an election. So that was quite suspicious. that you had 4 unions on the ballot, and at least one of them came from out of nowhere, and the suspicion was like this is just created to confuse people and divide the vote, and the other 2 had ties to the CTM. So it was unclear how it was going to go. There were also, workers were saying that General Motors was favoring these other unions, allowing them access to the plan, allowing them to campaign. And also like there were threats immediately preceding the election against the principal officer of Cynthia, Alejandra Morales. Somebody showed up in unmarked, or a group of people showed up in an unmarked pickup outside her house and threatened her, and death threats against another Cynthia officer like the weekend before the vote. There was another group, the Coalition, one of the 4 unions that was on the ballot, linked to the CTM, who were making these arguments that we are the ones who are going to defend your jobs. Cynthia is, essentially is backed by the international labor movement. It's backed by U.S. unions and Canadian unions, like taking money from them. Those unions that are supporting them just want to steal our jobs and take them back to the U.S., back to Canada. Cynthia had a great response to that, which was workers everywhere are struggling. We're part of a global labor movement. We need to fight together, and it's the responsibility of workers everywhere to support one another. We welcome that support, and that actually went a long way towards diffusing the message from these CTM linked unions, which is a common message. So anyway, when the vote happened, February 1st and 2nd, Cynthia won in a landslide. They won 76% of the vote. The Coalition, the second place finisher, won 19% of the vote. It was almost 90% turnout. So it was, an overwhelming, affirmation for a genuine independent union there. One of the 4 unions only got 18 votes. So supposedly they got 2,000 signatures.
Of the signatures to get on the ballot.
They got 2,000 signatures.
Yeah.
So that is it's quite suspicious, and especially given that like there was a lot of international attention on this and a lot of attention from the Mexican labor authorities, and yet still, you had some serious questions about how they verified the signatures, whether they verified the signatures, or how those signatures were obtained. And this is important stuff to follow going forward, because there are going to be tens of thousands of more legitimation votes, and hopefully some votes for new unions. But there's still a lot of dirty tricks. But so now Cynthia has 6 months to negotiate a contract with General Motors. That contract, under the new labor law reform in Mexico, has to be approved by a majority of workers at the plant. It's a real inspiration, I think, to other workers other workers in Mexico. It's a real inspiration to the independent labor movement there. It should be a real inspiration to us, in the U.S. to see Mexican workers fighting back and, using their new rights. We should do everything we can to support them, and we should pay attention to the contract battle at General Motors. But hopefully, this really opens the floodgates toward more independent union efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that one of CTM's hits against the Cynthia was that they were backed by U.S. unions, and somebody in the chat asked if are these workers supported by the UAW, and he also said, I think the UAW would try to organize them. What is the stance of, I think you kind of alluded to that there is some amount of support and funding of Cynthia by U.S. unions, but explicitly, what's the relationship between unions like the UAW and this new independent union, and why isn't the UAW organizing them under their banner?
Mm-hmm. The UAW came out, publicly in support of a free and fair vote in, at the plant, and AFL-CIO did similarly, and has played an important role in pressuring the Mexican government to make sure that workers are able to freely exercise their rights. I think there's a lot of work to do to generate more solidarity among U.S. auto workers, U.S. UAW members, and and members of independent unions in the auto sector in Mexico. I think this is a big step forward towards that. As far as organizing under the same banner, I think that we currently we have different federations or different confederations in in different countries. But I definitely hope that the UAW and UAW locals and UAW members will be supportive of Cynthia's efforts. Because even UAW locals are pitted against each other.
Right.
Long been the case, right? And it's not limited to the UAW, but so you either embrace this idea that we're all competing against one another in a eternal race to the bottom, or we wage like a concerted effort, a concerted fight back against these companies, to raise the standards everywhere. And there was some really good solidarity shown by General Motors workers from Brazil, who went there, who went and were in Silao during the election. And so hopefully next time UAW could send some members down as well. But
right. Well, then let's to wrap it up. Let's kind of expand on that point that you mentioned about why U.S. unions and U.S. workers should support movements like this, because you said that basically the choice is we kind of bend to this logic of competition and create a race to the bottom where even locals within the same country are pitted against each other, not to mention locals and unions in different countries. What is going to be how is this going to affect workers in the United States if we can begin to see a real upsurge of independent unionism in Mexico?
Mm-hmm. I think the way that this affects workers in the U.S. is that, we will have genuine partners in our efforts to build a strong labor movement, to build that can pressure our employers like General Motors or Amazon or well, you name them, to raise standards everywhere. Without that, Mexican workers have been held down by the law, by their employers and by these corrupt unions for so long, and there have been many important efforts to build genuine organizations, but they've been limited. If there are more fighting independent unions in Mexico, just like if there are more fighting unions in the U.S., all workers will be better off for that. And we could figure out how we can actually take it to these companies, and have jointly support one another. Yeah.
Yep.
So that they can't. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. An injury to one is an injury to all, and a victory for one is a victory for all, I think is the quickest way to say that. Dan, thanks for being so generous with your time. We went a little bit over 30 minutes, but I think it was good. You can read more of Dan and Luis's reporting on this in LaborNotes. They have written several articles about this campaign, how it began, and where it's at now. So highly recommend you go read those articles and subscribe to LaborNotes. They are a great organization. They have really great trainings that I've been to several of them recently, stewards trainings, organizer trainings, just all sorts of stuff. Definitely look into what LaborNotes is doing. Really great organization.
Absolutely. And thanks again, Dan, for all you do. I see your emails on the DSA labor group, and you're all over the place. You were trying to round up folks to go to Mexico to oversee this election. So, yeah, I really appreciate all you do for us as a movement, and glad to hear some good news coming from south of the border, and looking forward to seeing what their organizing can bring.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys. Keep up the good work.
All right, appreciate it. All right, so that was Dan Dimaggio, an assistant editor of LaborNotes. You can find more labornotes.org. So he talked about, we were talking about company unions. We were talking about company unions with Dan Dimaggio in Mexico. And by and large, we like to think that company unions are a thing of the past in America, but not if Marco Rubio has anything to say about it. And, we've been hearing a lot about the right becoming more pro-worker, that, the right is the real party, the Republicans are the real party of the working class now, right? That's what we hear.
I guess in the same sense as like the mafia, there's pro-workers, the mafia is, that seems to be the model they're looking to emulate.
Yeah. So, what are we talking about? Rubio, he's finally put some legislation to this, to this supposed push of the Republican Party to become more pro-worker. We've been hearing the talk for so long. I mean, just years. Since Trump came into office, really, he was talking about Obama shipping jobs overseas, Clinton's shipping jobs overseas, Bush shipping jobs overseas, and he's going to change it. He's going to bring jobs back, and he's going to make things better for the American worker. And that didn't really happen. But that's basically it. It's all been talk, and Rubio has put some legislation, and the legislation is legalizing company unions. Here's what the bill does explicitly. It provides new authority for employees and employers to establish voluntary employee involvement organizations to discuss workplace issues. That's legal. You can, it is already legal to have a suggestion box.
And 3 or 4 of you can go to the suggestion box at the same time. If you want. You can copy each other's answers, put it in there.
It clarifies that an employee involvement organization, EIO, may be established and dissolved by mutual consent between employers and employees, which means that the employer can dissolve it. It's basically at the will and pleasure of the employee. It is not authorized to engage in or negotiate collective bargaining agreements, which, that's maybe company union is a bit hyperbolic, but still. And it does not preclude employees from forming a labor union. It ensures that violations of EIO-related provision shall be adjudicated in the U.S. court system and not by the National Labor Relations Board. And it provides that EIO members at companies with more than $1 billion in yearly gross revenues with the opportunity to elect a representative to serve as a non-voting member of the company's board of directors, again, at the will and pleasure of the company. The company can decide whether or not workers can elect a non-voting member of the board, which is like you can do that already. A worker can already be on a voting member of the board. I mean, this is just so it's so silly. It does not actually suggest. It does not actually make anything better. It basically either restates the law as it is, or encourages employees to involve themselves in these organizations instead of non-company dominated organizations. Matt Brunig wrote a piece about this in the People's Policy Institute titled, "What is the Point of Marco Rubio's Company Union Bill?" And from here, and quoting from there, he said that that what it does is these employee involvement organizations contemplated by the 2022 TEAM Act, the act is called Teamwork for Employees and Managers, where not simply duplicating existing employee participation programs that are already legal, this act would give employers another union avoidance tool by allowing them to muddy the waters and by allowing them to fend off union organizing drives by setting up their own internal labor organizations. And that's the problem. That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
It's
because I could see I can really picture it now, where you have workers, especially maybe who are new to a workplace. They start looking around, asking some questions. Maybe they have some issues, and the vibe they get is, "Well, we don't need a union. We've got this. We've got this direct connection." And this reminds me, like, going back to the schools when your principal might set up a leadership team that the principal chose, and the principal can listen to the team's recommendation at their discretion, and is allowed to dissolve the team. Not be, it's just one of those where, on paper, it looks like maybe you have some input, but I like what Matt said there. It's about muddying the waters, and the more they can confuse folks, and get people's efforts and energies and time spread and scattered, the better that is for the management.
Right. Exactly. And that's the issue with that bill. So there are a couple of things that we wanted to get to in the main show that we didn't get to, and that's we wanted to give you an update on the legislative session. And this is, let's go to that section. So we've been tracking another bill in the legislature this session, an anti-speech bill, HB 2. Last week it passed out of committee. It advanced to the full House for consideration. Still hasn't been voted on in the full House yet. You can see our interview with Felicia Scalzetti about it for more details. But the crux is this: it further restricts the rights of working Alabamians to picket their boss and protest the state. And that's an issue. The bill would hold innocent people in prison for a minimum of 24 hours. That's not an opinion. That is a fact. Because anybody arrested under this legislation is subject to that mandatory holding time.
And because they have not been convicted of a crime, they are innocent.
Right. And in fact, the author of the bill admitted that this was not a byproduct. This was not a byproduct of the bill. Holding innocent people behind a cage for 24 hours is a purpose. It is an explicit purpose that is his intent. In the public hearing, he said, quote, "That's one of the reasons that I put the mandatory holding time in the bill. All those people got their charges dropped." Translation, all those people were innocent. All those people were innocent. All those people that were protesting police brutality in 2020 in Alabama. They got their charges dropped, and he wants to punish them for participating in a protest. And that's, when we talk about freedom and liberty and constitutional rights, this should be chief among them. Innocent until proven guilty. A right to a fair trial. The author of this bill does not think that these things are important. He thinks that he, down in Montgomery, ought to have the power to throw you behind bars for a minimum of 24 hours without a trial for quote-unquote rioting, which, let's remember under this definition, does not necessitate you having damaged a lick of property, hurt a single hair on a person's head, or even have been present at the protest, because you can also be arrested and charged with a felony for, quote unquote, funding a riot. We remember that I donated to bail funds to get people out of prison who were arrested unconstitutionally, illegally, and they had their charges dropped. I donated to bail funds to help get them out, and I'm sure many of you did as well. Under this bill, we could be charged with felonies for supporting our brothers and sisters and getting them out of jail, whether they were wrongfully arrested at a protest for racial justice or on the picket line. All that you have to do to be arrested and convicted under this bill, if you're at the protest, is not play Simon Says properly with the police and stay after an order to disperse, and then have them think that you potentially pose a danger to property or persons. This is all totally giving cops more power. And then if you're convicted, you're looking at 30 days mandatory minimum. A 30-day mandatory minimum. People are arrested.
That's life-changing.
Yeah. People are arrested on bogus charges all the time. And like we said, dozens of folks were arrested in 2020 in Alabama improperly, and they had their charges dropped. This only further enables that behavior. And so with all of this as a prelude or as a backdrop, let's compare this to the rhetoric around another bill that's working its way through our legislature, which is a constitutional carry bill.
Before you dive into that, Jacob, I want to mention that just last weekend, there were 2 separate deaths at the Madison County Jail here in Huntsville, Alabama. And that's where you would be. The Blue Roof Inn is known here. That's where you would be. 2 people died. And this is not the first time this has happened. People die within 24-hour stays of jails.
Right.
I know folks who've experienced that with folks that are in their network, friends, family members. Chances are some of you listening has either experienced going into jail, or you have loved ones who have gone to jail, and even a 24-hour stay on charges that are totally bogus, that you'll never be convicted of, can end your life.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so serious, I think, both from a broader issue of we should have the right to picket, we should have the right to peacefully protest, just that, the assault on that is a disgrace.
Mm-hmm.
But then the individual implications on if you are one of these people who are snared up in this, and let's be real about the type of people they're going to go after.
Right. Yeah. It's not going to be wealthy people. It's not going to be people at the Brooks Brothers riots.
Right.
That's not who's going to get arrested under this bill. So let's compare that rhetoric, the rhetoric around the anti-speech bill, where they are playing up outside agitators, quote unquote, potential damage to property, all of these things, and they're playing up the need for law and order, and all. Let's compare that to the rhetoric around the constitutional carry bill. The bill's author, Senator Allen of Tuscaloosa, said this in its support, quote, "As an elected official who swore to uphold the constitutions of this state and country, I will always do everything in my power to preserve the rights of Alabamians, especially those granted by the Second Amendment." You've got the same people throwing around their support for the Constitution, for this constitutional carry bill, even with acknowledgement that there might be some risk. I heard Senator Sam Gavan on the radio talking about his support for this bill and recognizing that it's faced opposition from cops because cops don't like the idea of the people that they interact with being armed. And, to a certain extent, I guess who can blame them? So the police associations are very much opposed to this bill. And in talking
this
about...
is like the one time
right.
ever where the right wing and the cops will not be on the same page.
Right. Yeah. And so he was talking about, he was like, look, I respect the police's opinion and I appreciate them, but I just think this freedom is so important that it overrides their concerns, and and they're trampling on these freedoms with the first bill that we were talking about. I mean, why the concern for the Constitution when it comes to guns, but not to speech and assembly? As far as human life goes, far more risk comes from folks walking around with guns all the time. Of course. But where there's less risk to owners and bosses and campaign donors when you have an unorganized group of folks, some of whom carry guns. They are much less threatening to the people who donate to these campaigns than even an unarmed but organized group of workers. And that's the difference. They don't like people having opinions that are different than them. They don't like people expressing those opinions, and they certainly do not like workers standing up to the boss. And so if it takes trampling on freedoms to empower the boss or to empower the state, they're willing to do it. But they will really talk up their commitment to those freedoms when it comes to guns. And still, I do not think this constitutional carry bill applies to picket lines. I believe under this bill, guns will still be prohibited at picket lines and protests.
Yeah. So that's the other thing is you're not allowed to carry at protests or picket lines. Again, I can see the logic behind that. Whether it's good or bad, I'm not going to make that call. But something we should mention here is that as much as they love to talk about Second Amendment rights, we know that in effect, in practice, who gets to exercise those without punishment is also very, very disparate, because if you are a young black man legally carrying a firearm, the response you're going to get from law enforcement is different. And poor folks carrying firearms are going to be treated differently than, the suburbs, the wealthy suburbs. Chances are, if you're in Mountain Brook and you have firearms, you're not very concerned about the police.
Yep.
But if you're in North Huntsville, you should be. And that really pisses me off as a born and bred Southerner, as someone who owns guns and grew up learning how to shoot guns. I fully support people's right to have firearms. I will always have mine. And, so that's something I think we should put out there. It's not like we do exist. There are left-wing people who are pro-gun. I don't want to say pro-gun, but pro Second Amendment rights, I suppose. But it's just, it's infuriating that, like you said, this is like the one constitutional issue they really love to talk about.
Right.
Never mind they're violating all your other constitutional rights in the same committee hearing sometimes.
Yeah.
The same damn day, the same people, writing the same bills. But then, put on this whole facade about constitutional rights, which even that is so utterly narrow and inequitable in practice.
Right. Exactly. That's the issue. And yeah, I mean, like Adam said, it's not
it shows what they fear.
Right.
They are afraid of people power. They are afraid of those diverse crowds they saw throughout the summer of 2020, of young folks, older folks, black, white, gay, straight. It was an incredibly diverse collection of people, and it was happening not just in New York and LA and Chicago, but in Huntsville and Birmingham and Mobile and Athens and Decatur and small towns. And I think that scares them to see interracial solidarity. And it scares them to know that workers are on picket lines and may take matters into their own hands and try to shape their own destinies in terms of their own workplace.
Right. Yep.
You're pissing me off today, Jacob.
I know.
Not you. Just
Yeah.
You're bringing the content today that just it's quite irritating.
Bad news bear today. Well, let's go ahead and get to our next segment. I think we may have a fun one. We may get to that Macy's clip at the end. It's just really quick, and it'll be just something fun to laugh at.
But if you haven't already, please do participate in the Hometown Action,
Yes.
where you can contact your legislator. It's very easy. If nothing else, you need to know where they stand, and you need to know that they've heard from you.
Right. Yep.
So send them an email, call their office, and say, hey, I sent you an email. I'd like a response.
hmtn.link/HB2. hmtn.link/HB2 is the information there. So let's go ahead and get to Last Week in Southern Labor. Every week, Jonah Furman writes a newsletter, Who Gets the Bird? You can read it at whogetsthebird.substack.com, where he compiles a list, almost exhaustive list, of everything that happens in the labor movement in the United States. And what we do, with his permission, is we go through that list and see what happened in the South of the United States last week. And we bring you Last Week in Southern Labor. So in new organizing, 63 workers at a specialty elastomers plant in Cantonment, Florida, which Celanese recently acquired from ExxonMobil, they are organizing with IBEW Local 733. 29 linemen for the Marshall DeKalb Electric Cooperative in Boaz, Alabama, are unionizing with IBEW Local 443. We just talked about that with Bill Blackman. Congressional staffers have announced a historic bid to unionize, as well as the staff of the Financial Times. It looks like the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen is raiding a unit of Teamsters maintenance of way workers for railcar manufacturer Alstom in Sanford, Florida. 15 workers in the meat departments of 3 Albertson stores in El Paso, Texas, decertified UFCW Local 540 in a narrow 6-7 vote. In strikes and bargaining, Steelworkers Local 40, on their 126th day on strike, once again went back to the negotiating table with Special Metals in Huntington, West Virginia, and once again came back without a deal, primarily because of health care costs for the 450 strikers. So many reasons that we need to go to a national single-payer healthcare system. 30,000 steel workers, refinery workers nationwide are on a 24-hour rolling contract extension, which was agreed to 30 minutes before the initial strike deadline. Workers rejected a 1% offer, and there hasn't been any public movement from the company since then. Can you imagine the guts on these companies? 1%, a 1% raise in this economy. Good grief. In related news, Grist has a really interesting piece about how those locked out steelworkers in Beaumont, Texas are trying to leverage public funding for a big Exxon carbon capture project to settle a contract. That's very important. 11 of 25 workers who are seeking to unionize at UFCW Local 400 at 3 locations of Food Accelerator Union Kitchen in D.C. struck this weekend after management served disciplinary notices to 2 of the main organizers. Pretty impressive to see what is essentially a recognition strike, which is pretty rare, especially in food service. Staffers at the liberal D.C. think tank Center for American Progress are threatening a strike with the Nonprofit Professional Employees Union, IFPTE, in order to raise the wage floor, which currently sits at $40,000 a year.
Wow.
In D.C.
As much as I support their effort and I wish them all the best, they deserve a union, as does every worker. I don't know. I got to encourage some reflection about how you ended up there, and is that really the place you need to be, and what kind of values does this organization have?
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that.
After some serious work stoppage talk, the National Women's Soccer League Players Association have their first union contract. and the tentative agreement between Huntington Ingalls Steelworkers Local 8888, covering upwards of 10,000 workers, does not yet have a ratification date set, but the union is working on getting members quote-unquote summaries. In politics, there is a new bill in Congress to prohibit employers from cutting health insurance to striking workers, which would be a big deal, as this is a tactic we see used over and over in strikes to force workers to fold. That is huge. While the Democrats tinker at the edges of labor law, the right wing is just going ahead and proposing we establish company unions. We talked about that earlier. So the working class can escape their corporate overlords' excess wokeness or something. That was actually in Marco Rubio's press release, talking about how these are going to be an important tool for workers to escape corporate wokeness.
Yeah, it's just when you're going through the grind and you've been working hard all day, you're not getting enough. Your health insurance goes up every year. They cover less medicines every year. Your management are complete dicks. They don't know anything about what you do. What really irritates you is the wokeness.
Yeah.
That's what, that's what's really the problem there. It's not anything else that could be going on. It's just, man, they give some weird woke presentations in the HR department.
Yeah.
That's what we're worried about. On the political note, we probably will talk more about these two next week, but a couple of highlights that I've seen from Congress. Both actually seem to be fairly good news. The first one is regarding mandatory arbitration in terms of sexual harassment, sexual assault claims in the workplace. So many folks in this Me Too era have been speaking up about sexual assault and sexual harassment they've experienced in the workplace. And many of the reasons why, these stories come out so much later is because folks are locked into binding arbitration clauses where, if you are an employee, you're harassed on the job, you have to go through this arbitration process with the company, and you are restricted from just going out and getting your own lawyer or going, to your union to organize other ways to address it. So that seems to be a step in the right direction. It would take sexual harassment claims out of the mandatory arbitration. It leaves everything else, unfortunately. So, if you're signing up to work for a company and that's what they do, they can still do it in terms of other issues you have, contract disputes, racial discrimination. But that would be a step in the right direction for American labor law coming out of Congress. That doesn't happen much. And the other big one I've been hearing is the Postal Service reform.
We've got to get somebody from the letter carriers on to talk about that.
What I've
seen,
the
postal workers.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, what I've seen is that the unions, the various postal worker unions, are on board with this legislation. It actually has gotten some bipartisan support. And the thing that I heard that really stuck with me, because it's been an issue for so long, was about the pre-funding of retirement pensions for Postal Service employees. Most folks do not realize that many years ago, in an effort to bolster privatization and basically sabotage the Postal Service, it was written into law that they had to pre-fund their retirement pensions for, I believe, 70, 75 years?
75 years.
Nobody does that. No, I mean, that is completely outside the norm of any industry, any kind of retirement benefits. And that was put in place so that they could then turn around and make the arguments that the Postal Service is failing. It's going to go bankrupt. It's unsustainable. So, of course, that means we should privatize and hook up FedEx and DHL. And
of course.
Yeah, so, hey, got a couple good things happening in D.C. That's a rare thing.
Yes, it's always nice when that happens. So we'll wrap it up on something fun. Go ahead and just play that Macy's clip, and you'll be able to figure out why I thought it was fun.
I haven't heard it, so this will be news to me. Okay.
Prince William, what are you hating on?
I'm hating on Macy's, and they fired a brilliant employee who had an idea of most employees at like retail stores, they can get employee discounts. Well, he was picking up all these shoes at Macy's that are extremely discounted already, and then use his employee discount on top of that, and he ended up reselling those on eBay and made $40,000 in 6 months doing
That's
this.
awesome.
Anyway, well, Macy's found out, and they just fired him on the spot. And yet there's nothing in their contract for employment or anything like that he can't do that. I mean, he was just being smart, and they said, nope, you can't make money off us, and fired him.
Wow. That's really unfortunate.
Yeah, I feel for the guy. That was brilliant.
That's really unfortunate. What is, and let me see if I understand this. If the guy didn't do anything wrong, what's his recourse? Does he have any?
He hasn't said yet. This is going viral on TikTok, and I'm sure he's going to seek legal counsel on this.
Wow, that's very unfortunate.
Yeah, okay, that was it. Yeah, his legal counsel can do whatever they want. They're not going to be able to get his job back.
Right. They'd be happy to have a sit down with him and advise, here is at-will employment.
Right.
That's what you had, buddy. And
now give me a couple $1,000s for my time.
Yeah, any attorney who takes that up is probably just trying to bilk them out of something, because unless there's more to the story that I'm not aware of, I don't know where this person was at. Do you know where?
Florida.
Florida? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to see the right-wing radio guys recognize the folly of at-will employment.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, poor Will. I feel bad for picking on him, but it's like, yeah, there you go. There's no recourse. That's why you need a union. That's exactly right.
What if, this is I know it's a really crazy idea, but what if when you dedicate your life and much, if not majority of your day to labor for a company and make them profits, that before they decided to just fire you and upend your entire lifestyle, they had a reason? What if they had to go through due process? What if they had to prove you actually deserve to be terminated? I mean,
I don't know, Adam. That sounds like communism to me.
Yeah, it's interesting how on like a case-by-case basis, even some of the most reactionary folks, they know it's BS. I mean,
they know it's unfair. Even Dale, like, he recognizes, like, this is bullshit.
Right.
Like, that's crazy.
Right. And you know what? There are folks who get fired in part because of their right-wing politics. And you know, oftentimes it's unfair as well.
Yes.
Obviously, you can't be expressing bigotry in the workplace, which, just face it, that's probably what happens with a lot of these cases. But
right.
I mean, if someone is being just arbitrarily fired from their job because they're a big Trump person or whatever, that's BS too. And that shouldn't happen either. And as much as I may disagree with that person's politics, that's not, you know, their employment shouldn't be yanked out from underneath them on a whim because of that.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, however, you know, politically right-wing they may be, they realize that. And pretty much, I mean, unless you were just incredibly sheltered and privileged, we all know people who've lost their job for something stupid.
Right.
Where, you know, they were unfairly targeted, or they were, maybe they made some honest mistakes but deserved, you know, nothing worthy of firing, or maybe they, wrong place, wrong time, whatever the situation. We all know people who have lost jobs or lost promotions because of just totally bogus stuff. And instead of looking at it on a case-by-case basis, or whether that person really deserved this or that, let's just look at everybody. Maybe everybody really deserves some due process. And it's not really up to us to decide who's morally worth it or financially worth it. Maybe we all just deserve a basic sense of rights in the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So that'll be it for us today. We did get a comment on the Facebook feed from Willie Shirley asking us if we could talk about the UMWA. We will be talking about that next week, because on Wednesday, Braxton Wright multi-time guest on this show and striking coal miner, and Cecil Roberts, president of the UMWA, will be speaking before the United States Congress at the invitation of U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, while our Congress people have stayed completely silent. So we're going to be talking about that, probably playing a couple of clips from that. So stay tuned. We'll talk about that next week. We'll also give you some updates on the Amazon Union campaign, because we will be pre-taping next week's show on Thursday, because I will be back in Bessemer knocking on doors and speaking to Amazon workers with RWDSU. Maybe we can bring Adam along this time. We've already got, again, this is the council's going down there. And like last time, we've got letter carriers, we've got iron workers. The iron workers training coordinator is actually going to be bringing along some of their apprentices as well. So that's going to be really cool. And I know that a few of my coworkers are going, David's going. So if you're a union member in the area, hit me up and you can come with us. We'll be meeting at the Steamfitters Hall Saturday morning before we go down. So yeah, it should be fun, and we'll be talking about bringing you some updates on both of those campaigns that are going on in Middle Alabama.
And on that note, I want to plug real quick. You guys did a great fundraiser for UMWA this past week. You mentioned it earlier. I don't even know who all was involved with that beyond you and DSA. But I also know there's another fundraiser coming up this week. So if you missed last week's, there's another one. We're not involved with this one, but Jobs with Justice is going to be doing one Tuesday, February 22nd at 7 p.m. Central. Looks like they got various groups behind this, including not just Jobs with Justice, but South Dakota AFL-CIO, Southern Workers Assembly,
Chicago Federation of Labor.
Right, who we've talked to. I was really impressed with Southern Workers Assembly. So, yeah, it's really been nice, even though, as per usual, our media here, our politicians here, just remain silent, or even worse, singing the company line. But we have seen a tremendous amount of solidarity from folks in the labor movement and in the kind of the broader social justice movement. And that's really what it's all about, and love to see folks from California and South Dakota,
that's awesome.
who give a crap about what's happening to these workers down in Central Alabama.
Yep. If you want to leave us a voicemail, you can do that, 844-899-TVLR. We might listen on next week's show, 844-899-8857. If you want to support the show, you can go to unionly.io/o/TVLR and give us a one-time donation, or become a sustaining member. Give us a monthly donation to help us stay on the air. It really does help. The largest single source of revenue that we have is our listeners, so it does help. We're on commercial radio stations, so we do pay for the time, so it's basically like an infomercial for unions, and so we do have to pay for that time, and your donations help us stay on the air, as well as our sponsors, and so we appreciate them. We appreciate you for listening, for contributing, and for sharing, and we will see you next week.